before I think the microphone is the correct one and the camera is the correct one. Um,
That's always good.
yeah. I should have done this before. Anyway, so we're live. We're live.
Hey,
Good
Jose.
morning. Yeah. Hey. Good morning. Good afternoon. Good evening, anyone watching now or later. It is my pleasure to be joined again by Jared Michaud. Jared, how are you?
I'm I'm crazy busy, but I'm doing good, Jose. I've got three more books that are set to go to print by the end of the year, which is only possible because I'm doing some self-publishing, and then I've got an event at least 3 days a week every week for the rest of the year for getting these books going. So it's
Yeah.
quite a busy schedule.
Well, plenty of talking points there.
Yeah.
But I'm grateful that you got in touch and you're back. It seems that certain people are coming back to the channel, and I don't know if you know you're comfortable. People like it here, or it's just desperation, and you just talk to anyone. So come on, humor me a little bit.
Oh, no, you know what? I appreciated our first conversation very much. There were a few people who I talked to who I actually did not try to get back in touch with because I really didn't want to repeat that kind of conversation. And you were one of the few I did actually say, you know what, I really want to go back on his show. So no, it was out of preference, Jose.
Cheers, thank you. I don't know. To call this a show, it's a bit of a stretch. I honestly
Well,
don't know what I'm doing. So
you know
I
what? It's
appreciate that.
okay. We get on, we talk, and I think our last conversation, at least, we actually had a useful conversation. I shared it with quite a few people when it comes to the AI thing. I've
Yeah.
never talked about that in any other on anybody else's show or in any other context. And I thought it mattered, and you actually got it. And most people don't understand it. Your background in the economic side of things actually helped a lot. So,
Yeah, it's a bit of tricky one, and I would recommend actually anyone that hasn't checked that out. The conversation we had, I was trying to check the date. It was a few. Was it still this year or was it late last year?
I actually can let me actually check because
Because
uh,
it was really good conversation about we were talking about the impact of AI on the creative arts, not
yeah,
just writing but also um,
graphics,
paint.
everything.
That's right. That's
Yeah,
right. And
yeah. Well,
it,
and yeah, and it was a really good conversation. And I actually have all of this stuff that I put all of my appearances up at jaredandmisho.com anywhere anytime I go on
I saw
somebody's
that.
show.
I saw
And
that.
so I think
Hang on, I've got it here. It was. Because I've got it here. Hang on. We
February 16th of this year.
There you go. February this year, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. And also, yeah, that's right. And also because usually when I talk to other guests, it's usually about their work, which is what we're going to be doing today.
Yeah.
But I hardly ever get to sit down and pick up a topic and talk to big people about something specific. So that
Well,
was a
hey,
good
if you
thing.
ever have a mind to do it, let me know. I'll happily come on and, talk with you about whatever. That's
Yeah, I no. Like, I'm really happy to have these conversations, and I think that's kind of an unexpected turn that the channel took me into. And sometimes I feel like I'm doing a lot of live conversations and less book reviews, kind of thoughts and opinions. And I don't know if that's a good thing, a bad thing, if people watch them more or less than other kind of videos. And then I just gotta remind myself that I'm doing this for myself, not for
Well,
the.
even if okay, so let's say you're doing it for an audience. Even so, if you're interested in a topic enough to have an hour conversation, an hour and a half conversation about it with somebody who cares about it, then your audience probably is interested in the topic. And if you're not doing it every show, then people are going to be, they'll be nice enough to bear with you. And if they don't like that particular week's whatever, they'll skip it. That's normally how it goes. And but my impression is that if it's important enough and it's sort of you know touches on what you care about, which is all of this fiction stuff, these worlds, the all the stuff that we're
Mm,
doing, then I think actually people will be interested. So it's like that conversation about AI. That's actually a big deal. And it has become a bigger deal since we talked about it. There are so many people now who will not have anything to do with AI generated artwork or AI generated anything in the creative spheres because they feel like it's not a legitimate way to create art or anything else. And personally, I prefer not to have that on the cover of anything that I publish if I can help it. But
Yeah. No. And there's some really helpful things in there. But anyway, we already had that conversation. But now, like, there's an AI tool that
right,
usually when I take the conversations, like we were discussing before going live, and then I create the audio file for the podcast, I usually just write a couple of lines describing the episode. Oh, today I talked to so and so about so and so. Check out their website or whatever.
yeah,
But now there's this AI software where you feed the audio file, it analyzes it, and it gives you like two long paragraphs, kind of
right.
summarizing the discussion points and sort of the key ideas and whatever.
That's a heck of a
So
good tool.
yeah, and it comes out like, I think from the couple of examples I've seen, it's like, grammatically sound. It's pretty well structured and so on. So I think it is inevitable. Once again, it's the use you make of it, isn't it?
It is. And it's like I say, when it comes to my own writing, I don't let AI touch my writing with a 10-foot pole, so to speak.
Yeah,
I keep AI entirely away from what I'm writing. But when it comes to art and stuff, I don't always have a choice as far as promotion stuff. I don't have all the budget in the world. I
yeah.
just literally cannot do what I want to do unless I use some amount of AI generated artwork. And then in every case, when I've done a cover, I have given my cover artist AI generated concept art to work off of so that they charge me less and it takes them less time to get something that we both like. So
Mm,
it's a great tool.
I get that. I get that. Because even going through the more sort of traditional route, was it last week? I was talking to Thomas J. Devens, and he had an
Mhm.
issue with one of his books because with the cover, the artist he paid to design the cover of his book used kind of a stock images, and then so you play around with them. And then by accident, he found out that some of the author had a sort of very similar cover that came from the same stock image. And then he realized I had to pull out the cover out and get a new one done because you almost had these two different books with a very similar cover that came from the same root image.
Mhm.
So even trying to use a traditional artist can be fraught with peril.
Well, and let me give you another example here. So I have 3 books in my Epimyth series in the Energemetra 6 universe.
Mm,
Those are my sci-fi books. I've got Bright Star, I've got From the Void. Both of those are out. Veil of Mysteries is due out November 16th. Cover reveal is coming in a week. It's going to be really cool. And all of those have covers that are done by a, traditional art. And then I have this other sort of, it isn't really full length novels. They're more novellas. It's like 100 pages each,
mm,
and they're a fantasy series. And I have 2 of those that I'm hoping to have out by the end of the year. One I'm working on right now. And the artwork for the cover is a composite of, art. I think he used some AI generation in there, and then the character art is done 100% by the artist. And so it's a composite of things. And it really doesn't bother me to do that because, like you say, it is just a tool. And these are really short works. And I can't afford to put 800 bucks
mm.
into a cover for something that's 100 pages long. It's just not going to happen. So, what are we talking about actually doing here? Because in the end, in the final estimation, people are always going to prefer art that comes from a human. We're just going to prefer it because it's more authentic, it's more
Yeah,
real. And
absolutely.
I don't think my personal opinion is that AI generated stuff will never really be able to compete. And once you've tried to generate something with one of those AI generation tools, you spend almost as much time going through the prompts and getting something that's close to what you want as you would trying to create something. And even then, it's not as authentic and not as good, in my opinion,
Mhm.
as if you had somebody create something from scratch. So
Yeah. No, that's right. But we did talk about all of that plus more
we
back
did, we
in
did.
back in
We're
February.
rehashing.
So we'll redirect people to the video conversation and the podcast episode. And so today we're here to talk about your book. So you've already mentioned you've got kind of two main branches, isn't it? The kind of
Yeah,
sci-fi thing and the fantasy thing.
yeah.
What would you consider your main sort of series?
Well, the sci-fi is the one that I have been working on since I was 12. I started writing in the Intergeometry 6 universe when I was 12 years old, and I wrote a 250,000 word book that was a total waste of paper. But it taught me how to write, right? So it
Yeah.
was a great use of my time. It was the most important thing I've ever written because it taught me what I can and can't do, what I should and shouldn't do at a very base level, and I've been able to build up from there. So that's sort of been my mainstay all along. Is that's my first love. That universe really is. And so I did that when I was 12, and then I shelved it after I turned about 16 until last year. And that was when I started writing Bright Star. And Bright Star is, well, what I should say is the book I started writing when I was 12 was the prequel to Bright Star. Um,
Okay.
and actually, I have here, I might as well show it since I've got
Go
it.
on.
There's Bright Star.
Right.
And so what I was writing when I was 12 was the prequel to that. And um, I shouldn't have written a prequel, but I didn't know it at the time. Prequels are hard because where they end up being kind of wooden and difficult to write because um, they're going to end at a very specific place and you can't really control it.
Mm-hmm. I get
And,
that.
and so I had trouble with that. And then writing Bright Star, I just decided, you know what, it needs to come out. I need to do the real story. So I started writing that 2 years ago, and that has been what I've put most of my time and effort into. And then this fantasy one. So these are full length novels, YA novels. The second one's going to be about 70,000 words, which is on the short side for an adult novel, but it's on the longer side for something that's considered YA. And
Mm-hmm.
the reason I'm doing YA is just because I didn't want to put any kind of adult content in these. I wanted everybody to be able to read them. My youngest readers are about 10 who
Yeah.
enjoy it, and my oldest ones are in their 50s. So everybody's everybody I know of who has tried it. Actually, I have one lady who's 64 who really loves them. So everybody who tries them, it's appropriate for all the ages. It is deep enough for an adult, but it's accessible enough for kids, and that was what I was aiming for. So there's that. That's my main
Okay.
focus.
Let's talk about sci-fi for a minute
Yeah.
because from from my ignorant point of view, because I haven't read much sci-fi, so
Okay.
in my head, to me, sci-fi is kind of Isaac Asimov, the whole robots thing, the whole sort of is science fiction, but
Sure.
stress the word science. Like everything has to be underpinned by some kind of plausible future science that makes this world possible.
Yes.
But then I'm thinking, well, Dune isn't really that. It's got some very heavy fantasy elements. Star Wars, it's got some, huge
It's
fantasy elements.
You would call Star Wars space fantasy almost.
Right. So then, because I'm bringing this up because I made a video, I think 4 or 5 years ago, about what I found were the problems with modern fantasy, and is that the fantasy elements have been stripped out, and it's all kind of like a pseudo historical fiction. And then someone made a comment that said it was funny how modern fantasy is less fantastic, but modern sci-fi has got more and more fantastic. So I'm just talking sort of labels here.
Yeah.
What do you think is sci-fi?
Okay. I love this topic because I've put a little bit of thought into it since I started writing this. Um, so the way I put it together in my head, my stuff has the plausible future science behind it. But what I actually wanted to write was a space fantasy closer to Star Wars. That
Right.
was what I wanted to write. So I came up with all of the science that would make that plausible. But what I'm actually writing is closer to a space fantasy than a sci-fi, because I'm not explaining a lot of those futuristic science elements. It doesn't have the hard sci-fi feel that an Asimov does, or something like I don't know if you know of the show The Expanse, but the novels that go into that, or some of the other stuff that's actually hard sci-fi. I didn't do that, but it was because the character didn't care about the tech.
Right.
If the character cared about the tech, I would have explored the tech because it is there. But what I wanted the space fantasy, because the characters are doing other things. They don't need to care about the tech. So I would say that you're right about where the modern fantasy has been going in a lot of cases, but that in my case, it was sort of a mix of the two. And technically, it could be sci fi, but it really isn't, because that wasn't what I wanted to be writing.
So, my follow-up question would be, like, Star Wars is almost like a fantasy. The Force is magic, basically,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So then you take Star Wars with all the creatures and everything, and it could have worked in a sort of more classic medieval fantasy setting.
Yeah.
So what made you choose that futuristic, high technology setting for the story that you want to tell?
Well, I guess that actually goes back to Star Wars in some ways, because when I was growing up, I loved Star Wars and I loved being a part of the stories that I read. And so whether it was Star Wars or Ender's Game or Lord of the Rings or any of uh, what was the one, Dragonlance Chronicles was one of the
Mhm.
medieval ones that I read. There were any number of books that I read, and I loved to put myself in those books as a character and to be a part of the story in my imagination after I would finish reading. And so, what possible universe could contain all of those other universes so that they're accessible to me, the character in that story? And it had to have sci-fi elements in order to have contact with sci-fi stories, but because medieval fantasy stories all exist on a planet somewhere, then theoretically in my brain it just made sense that the whole universe had to be a sci-fi universe. And that was sort of where the Energemetra 6 universe was born from. And the very first event in Bright Star is a character being transported from our world into another universe. And I'm talking with another author right now about doing some crossover between, our two series. And one of the things to me that I've always wanted to do with this is to bring other people's universes into my universe, and vice versa, to whatever extent they want, because that was the way I originally imagined it. That was what I wanted to do. And so it had to be sci-fi in order to make all of that work, at least in my head when I was, in my young teens.
Yeah. So hang on, because you've dropped the bomb there. Are we doing a Cosmere thing? Are we doing another multiverse thing here?
Okay, think of it this way. Okay, let's actually back up here, because this is going to be fun. What makes something real, Jose?
Oh God, I'm I'm not ready to have a conversation.
Okay, okay,
So
so let me tell
whatever
you what I think.
whatever
Let
your
me
five senses can deal with.
Okay, I think that the stories that I have read that have deeply impacted me emotionally are more real to me than some real objects in the real world that I have never contacted. There's this whole chunk of the Pacific Ocean that nobody ever bothers with because it's just wide open ocean with nothing in it. The stories I've read are more real to me. They have impacted my life more than that piece of Pacific Ocean has. Okay, now it's part of the real world. Okay, now let's.
That is a deep conversation, because then we need to
It
define
is.
what is real, isn't it? And
It
that
is.
that big chunk of the Pacific Ocean, You haven't seen it, I think.
It
I haven't seen it,
it
but
physically exists,
we're
though.
pretty sure it's there, isn't it? So
Yeah, it physically exists.
yeah,
And despite what some of the flat Earth people would tell you, it is on the other side of the world from me.
yeah,
It's on
yeah,
the other side of the globe. So it's a physically existent thing, but it's more real to my internal world, these books that I've read, than that chunk of Pacific Ocean is. And so why can't we have a thing in the case of these fictional worlds where if I have an author who wants to do a crossover work with me, and their characters and my characters have a portal open or some kind of ability to move themselves between those two universes, why shouldn't that happen? Why shouldn't that world be just over the edge of reality from us here in the real world, where we can't reach it physically, but it's just over the edge of reality, and all of those other realities can touch each other?
no, no, no.
That's the way I think about it anyway.
Okay. So what I would say to that is that I haven't got an issue with that
Mhm.
because not so much now, but having spent many an evening, a day, a whole day of my youth playing Dungeons and Dragons, traveling to the Shadowfell, traveling to the Feywild, traveling to the different planes of existence, I get. My only issue now is that that was cool when I was 13, 14, 15. But but I don't have the answer because I don't know what other method of transportation between those two universes can there be that is not a cheesy portal. I think the whole portal idea is now a bit cheesy, in my opinion.
Well, I use that as an example, but my characters don't use portals.
Right.
They move via other means. So
Because I tell you
let
who.
me
Cause,
hang on a second.
oh, go on, go on, go on. Sorry.
Oh, no, it's fine. What I was going to say though is there's this quote by C.S. Lewis that I just love in this context. C.S. Lewis said, "When I was 10, I read fairy tales in secret and would have been ashamed if I had been found doing so. Now that I'm 50, I read them openly. When I became a man, I put away childish things, including the fear of childishness and the desire to be very grown up."
No, I don't think that's our case. Like, we still read about dragons and wizards and stuff like that. I just,
Yeah,
because like, as much as I don't necessarily rate the literary quality of the Eldrick saga by Moorcock, I think the ideas he explores there are great. And in there, his eternal champion Eldrick moves between different realities and different universes. But there's no portals. He kind of just presents you with a different, that we are in a
yeah,
different universe because of the descriptions of the place and time.
absolutely.
And then when he describes the character with the red eyes and the pale skin and the long white hair, oh, that's Eldrick in this reality. But I think maybe quite inadvertently or not, he avoids explaining that traveling between the universes.
Well, and I have kind of avoided it as well, but only because in my mind there are as many ways to move between universes as there are people to imagine universes. And so to say it has to be a particular thing, not necessarily. I don't see that. In my own story, the character who moves from our world to this other world, I never did define how exactly he did it. All I did was say that there was a picture frame on the wall that had it was sort of my nod to C.S. Lewis. It had centaurs and um, fawns and a couple of other
Mm,
things carved into the picture frame, and it started glowing, and suddenly he's somewhere else.
right.
So
No, no, yeah, I get that. I don't know why I'm getting hung up on that thing now, but
I don't know, but it's a fun question, right?
I
I mean,
just so because I used to think that everything has been done in fantasy, save for the Black Lord actually winning, not Mistborn. That's a false premise. But So I used to think that everything has been done, and the more and more I talk to people, okay, I concede that maybe I was wrong. So then the question I'm starting to ask authors is like, what do you bring new to the genre, if anything at all? Because it's actually okay to keep on working within certain settings and confines. I've got nothing against that.
That's a good question. Actually, my answer has a little bit of context in it as well, and that is that you don't want to be entirely new. And I could come up with something. My brain is such that I could come up with something that is entirely new. And every time I have thought about doing that, the question is, how weird do you want to get? Because people like things that are familiar. They like variations on things that they know. And so if you take some stuff that people are familiar with and you bring into it new elements, you mix it up in new ways, and then you add your own, whatever new thing you can come up with, that's actually what people really value. That's what they want to see, is
Right.
they want a new twist on something that they are already familiar with. And that's just my observation. So most of what you'll see in my writing is actually fairly consistent with what other people have done in some sense. But I am bringing in something that I think is somewhat new, but I don't know how far down that rabbit hole you want to get, because we get into ideas that are, well, they're very, very Christian. I called back to C.S. Lewis, and a lot of what I'm doing is I find him to be one of my biggest inspirations. And what he did with his work that had never really been done before was he pulled, and I don't know that it had never been done, but it had never been done the way he did it, at least. I know MacDonald did some of it, but it had never been done the way he did it. And what he did was he took pieces of reality that were not exactly okay to accept in polite circles. The ideas of real magic and other things, and he put them to people in a way that was acceptable. He put them in a new world with characters that were talking animals and other various things. He did it in a way that was acceptable, that people could read about and really appreciate, and he did it with moral themes that
Mm.
were absolutely classic and that called to people. And so the other question here is one of, when we get into a story that actually grabs people, that people actually really want to love, not just that they're interested in, not just that they're intrigued by, but that has a classic feel to it that they really love, what is it that creates that? And I have my ideas of what that is, and that's one of the things that I'm trying to do, but I'm trying to take it further than I have ever seen anybody else take it.
I so I don't mind people putting their religious or political views in their works. I think sometimes it's not necessary, it's not totally unscapable, but I think it's okay. And it's up to the reader to decide whether you agree or disagree. But I think it's entirely the writer's prerogative to do that. I, I don't have an issue. Like if you or
I
ex author, like I've read books that are set in a Muslim, so they come from a Muslim approach because I was born in the last town of Spain to be conquered back by the Christians
ah
from the Moors.
mhm.
So I've grown up. I grew up with a very heavy sort of Islamic influence in
Okay.
the city that I lived and in my background. So I've read also you know from
Yeah.
from Arabic origin authors, and I don't mind having someone imbue the works with Christian views or Muslim views. I don't mind. It's up to me to
I
accept
have
them or disagree.
I have one issue, and I think you'll just agree with me on this, that when people get preachy in what they're writing, when they're preaching at you
Yeah, yeah,
a
yeah, yeah,
particular ideology, that's just annoying and it wrecks the story.
yeah.
And
So,
I don't like that.
so someone else that was obviously very, not necessarily political, but someone who really, she wrote to put her views forward was Ayn Rand
Yeah,
in Atlas Shrugged and The Fountainhead. I
yeah,
read those books. I really enjoyed those books.
me too.
Would I necessarily want to become a selfish objectivist, living by? Not necessarily, but I think I liked what she had to say, and I think there was
Yeah,
something very interesting. And those books are actually quite enjoyable as a novel themselves.
they
Um,
are. And frankly, she went further into the ideological pursuit than I'm comfortable doing. When you read that, or when you read a book like Freehold by Michael Z. Williamson, which is sort of a sci-fi take on that same worldview. Michael Z. Williamson wrote Freehold probably 20 years ago now. I don't remember when exactly, but it's actually kind of a sci-fi Atlas Shrugged sort of thing.
mm.
And it's interesting. But I wouldn't go as far into the ideological side of things as they did.
So
That's not what I'm wanting to do for my readers.
right, but you are a religious person.
Yeah.
I think you kind of mentioned that it may come up in your writing. Are you are you consciously aware of that, and do you sometimes hesitate to put those ideas into your books in case some readers may
I
go, "Oh, here, I don't want to read about
I
religion in my fantasy or whatever it is."
Let me put it to you this way. The way I see reality is so attached to God that I can't see a reality that does not have a creator. I can't conceptualize such an idea. I
Right,
think that and so in my writing, is there ever going to be a piece of my writing that does not try to pull from reality at a deeper level? I don't think that I can do that, Jose.
right.
So do I care if I'm scaring people off? Well, no, not really. If my writing bothers somebody, then they should put it down and go read something else. That's fine. But I'm also not interested in preaching at people. I'm just interested in taking a view of reality that I find to be interesting and symbolic and thoughtful, and putting it in front of people in a way that is hopefully useful to them as well as enjoyable. That's what I'm after.
So, so you're kind of following that thing about you're writing the book that you would like to read. You're
Yeah,
not writing to please other people, isn't it?
correct.
You're writing the book that you would like to read or to tell the story that you want to tell. And
And to tell the story that I want, that I wish I had been able to read when I was a young man, and that I want to have out there for my kids to be able to read as they grow up.
no, I understand that, and I can totally respect that. Absolutely. And you're not the only one. I think when did I talk to him about it? But sort of flash news in November, I'll be interviewing Christopher Rocchio again, the author of the Sun Eater series, and he also in the fifth book of the series, there's some sort of Christian references there. I think no, we talked about it a little bit in my last interview with him, that he found strength in religion kind of now later in his life and stuff. I'm okay with those things. Making an appearance is obviously important to him, like you say. He wants maybe for his children to read out. That's the story he wants to tell. I've got no issues.
You know, you keep saying this thing that's actually bugging me, because it
Go
isn't
on.
quite right to me. And no offense intended,
No, no, no,
but
no.
you say bringing religion into it, and to me that isn't what I'm doing at all. What I'm doing is I am working from a view of the world that takes for granted some facts that a secular mindset does not like. And that's okay. But it's not a bringing religion into something. It's I'm starting from a very basic set of beliefs that conflict with a lot of the what I would call garbage that the modern world has programmed people with.
Okay, so uh, maybe it's just my bad expressing myself. Maybe not. Maybe I didn't mean to say bringing religion into it,
Well,
but
I
maybe.
just
But let me say yes. clarifying. Maybe having clearly recognizable religious themes in the work. Would that be a better way to put it?
It would, but that would still be wrong because that's not what I'm doing. What I'm saying here is that I don't want to create in any way. I don't want to create something that preaches at people. What I want to do is I want to create a world that I think is based on solid truths. And that's going to look different from what Ayn Rand or what somebody else who has, like Heinlein. Heinlein would be a great example of somebody who believes something very different from what I did. And a lot of his work does kind of preach, but it's also based on this sort of totally different worldview. That's okay. I enjoyed Heinlein and I enjoyed Ayn Rand, and they're both good writers and they wrote enjoyable stories. But when you read my writing, it will remind you of reading somebody like C.S. Lewis, where even if he isn't preaching at you, all of the world, all of the ideas, all of the symbols, all of the everything is pointing back to something that is totally different.
Is recognizable, isn't it?
In his case, it certainly is. I don't know whether you would in mine or not. Maybe you would, maybe you wouldn't. And if so, that's great. I don't object to it, but I'm also not aiming at it. It's like we're making an issue of something here that to me isn't an issue when I'm writing. I'm not trying to bring anything into it. I'm just trying to create a really great story that has deep roots in real truth.
Okay. No.
And that's fine. I just wanted to reframe it a little bit because it's not about trying to program anything or trying to bring anything into it. It's simply about trying to create something that is deeply valuable and meaningful. And if I'm going to do that, I have to look to things that I find to be true. And so that's what that's going to look like from the perspective of someone who is secular, is that I have a worldview that is based on a world with a creator.
Okay.
And so that's fine. I don't mind if people don't like it and put it down, but I'm also not preaching at anybody at any point.
No. Thank you for clarifying that. Maybe it's just
sure.
my bad. Maybe I was putting too much weight on that.
Well, and I don't know that you did
doesn't need to
anything
be.
wrong, Jose, because this is a question that I get asked constantly. So I don't think you did anything wrong. I think it's just, as I've been thinking about this, what's been coming to my mind is that, no, I'm not trying to bring something in. I'm just trying to create something that I think is meaningful. The worldview I have is different from secular people who consider themselves to be secular or don't believe in a God. And that's okay that it's different, but I'm not trying to bring anything in. I just come from a different set of base assumptions.
Okay. That's great. Yeah, sorry.
No, you're good, man. I appreciate the opportunity to express it because it's been on my mind for a while.
Why so?
Because that question you asked is one that I get asked with almost everybody I talk to who is not also a Christian.
So, am I wrong? Because I think when I was sort of reading through your website, I think you openly declare that your religious views. So question.
Yeah.
So why? Why do you? Is that some? Because my personal opinion, I think religion is a relatively personal thing. I don't think that if I was to write a bio of myself, I think things like maybe your religion, your political inclination, and your sexual orientation aren't things that I would necessarily declare about myself when I'm introducing myself for the first time to other people.
That's a good question. So, as I've gotten older, I value truth more and more. And to me, what that means is that the things that are valuable to me are things that I want to share with other people, right?
Okay.
And so I tell people, yeah, I have 7 kids. I love my kids. My kids are awesome. I'm married to the most amazing woman in the world. That's important to me. Right, exactly. That's true. But those things are important to me, right? Okay, the thing that is even more important to me is that I have a personal relationship with the creator of the world. That is central and core to my life. And if I'm not telling people about that, what does that say about me? It says either that I'm ashamed of it or that I don't think it's that important or whatever. I can't deny that. I can't like not put it out there because the world thinks I should be uncomfortable with it or something when it is one of the most core and important parts of my life.
Okay, no, that's a view I respect. No,
Sure.
absolutely. Like, because
Uh,
I've
That's
like,
just the best answer I have for your question.
no, and that's great. I think because I've met people throughout my life
Hmm.
who then you find out that maybe they are homosexual or whatever,
Sure.
but it's not the first thing they will say about themselves when you meet them. And again, to me, I would equate that to what you're saying. Like, there's no need for anyone to feel
If
ashamed about those kind of
if
things,
well, okay, so
or at least to me.
let's say you discovered the most amazing thing in the world. Like something that is just totally mind-blowing and
I
you
get
want to
that.
share it with
I get
everybody.
that. I get that. I get that. Yeah.
That's where I'm coming from. When I tell people I know the Lord, I know who he is, I have a real relationship with him. This is amazing. Everybody needs this. This is important. I mean, I can't help but do that.
I get that. I understand that. Yeah. It's a bit like when I come to my wife about, I don't know, something
Yeah,
about some cycling news or some like
absolutely, man.
RPG news, and she looks at me like, yeah, I'm sure you find it fascinating. Yeah, yeah. I get
Sure, sure.
that.
And so to me, how can I help but share the most amazing thing in the whole of creation with people around me? I can't help but do that. So it isn't that it isn't that I'm trying to rub somebody's nose in something, except that I kind of really want people to know about these things I care about.
No, I get that. I can relate to that. Um, so,
Yeah.
because you mentioned as well, 7 kids.
Yeah.
How does the writing work? That's gonna be a madhouse.
Well, let me tell you a little story here. So 2 years ago, I started writing this. It's actually closer to 2.5 years ago now. I started writing Bright Star. I wrote for a full year. I did it in my bedroom with the door closed on my laptop, sitting on the dresser, so that the kids weren't like, right around me making all sorts of noise.
Yeah, yeah.
Then things changed a little bit. It got a little harder to work in there. So this year in January, I'm getting irritated with my kids being noisy for the fifth time. And I snapped at them for the fifth time. And my wife looks at me and she's like,
Why can't you not be more patient, right?
well, it isn't even that. It's like, this isn't going to work. And I'm like, okay, this isn't going to work. So that was when I started building this room I'm in right now. This room is in the basement. It has walls that are, let's see, they're about 8 inches thick. They have 3 or 4 layers of insulation.
And,
I have a vent system that has a maze in it
but
to
but
put
more importantly, does it look from the inside or from the outside?
both. Well, not really. The outside door doesn't have a lock, the inside one does, but I have 2 doors that open one in, one out. This is as close to a soundproof room as I can get in this
Yeah,
house. And so when I want peace and quiet, this is my study, and this is also a great room for recording audiobooks and podcasts and other such things. So
yeah,
very
yeah,
multi-purpose, but it also allows me to have quiet while I'm writing. Now here's another funny one that I've come up with, though. Over the past few months, I have discovered that the best way for me to physically sell my books is to be, this is going to sound odd, but there's a program called Authors in Grocery Stores here in the
right.
US.
Okay.
And so I sign up for the program and I can go sit in grocery stores and set up a table and sell my books to people who walk by through the grocery store. And there are a lot of writers who like to sit in a cafe and, write. And that's great, but that's sort of what I'm doing, but I get to sell my books at the same time. So what I've discovered is that I actually do pretty well sitting in a grocery store with sort of the white noise of people going by, selling my books. And then if somebody comes up to talk about my books, then I'm in the right mind space anyway, and it's fun to share about it. So
So are we talking Walmart style setup shop and
yeah,
yeah, and
I got
so
I put up a table. I set up a table with a nice sparkly tablecloth that's actually relative to this. I put my books on it. I had just today got a stand-up banner that's 7 feet tall that I'll be setting behind me that says Energemetra 6, Discover the Epimyth. Ask about our free ebook library and audiobook podcast.
So, how many of those have you done so far?
The grocery store thing?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I've done about 60 hours so far.
Which is a great idea. So why does that, and that works for you,
So far it is.
as opposed to, because I keep asking authors this thing, going to Comic Cons, going to book conventions, and setting up shop there. What's the difference? What's the benefit? What's the downside?
Okay. I've been to, let's see, I've been to a game con. I've been to 2 or 3 Comic Cons. I've been to, my experience is that if I go to a Comic Con, I'm going to be lucky to sell 8 or 10 copies of the book in a similar amount of time sitting in a,
Because people are there
because
for other stuff.
yeah, I don't know. People who go to Comic Cons here in the States don't read. I don't know, dude. I have no idea.
Actually, I think you're right, because in my experience at Comic Cons, there are thousands of people there, and there's only about 30 people on the queue for one of your biggest names in comics in the world. It's like,
Right.
just a chance to dress up. Like, there's got to be more to this than that.
Well, okay, so they like the action figures, they like the cosplay,
Yeah, yeah.
they like visual media far more than written media. And that's fine, but it isn't a great venue for me as an author. In terms of time spent, I'm going to be doing better to sit in a grocery store for 8 or 10 hours in a day and just do my writing, do my usual stuff, have my books sitting there. I don't have a table fee. I am paying a percentage of the cover cost of the book to the grocery store for the privilege of sitting in their store. But, whatever, that's okay. That's cost of doing business. And I get to meet people and sell my books, and it works. And to give you some idea here, my first week doing this, I spent 33 hours doing it. This hasn't been that long ago. This is less than a full month ago was the first week I did this. I spent 33 hours doing it that week, and I sold almost 40 books. Then then a week later or so, I went to a Comic Con and I sold 4 books in a whole weekend.
Okay, yeah, I can see the difference. So for anyone listening, there's a few indie authors in the periphery of the channel. Where can they find this? Is that website?
Authorsandgrocerystores.com, and use my name, Jared and Michaud, when you sign up, because then I get a little referral fee. That would be amazing, actually, if people end up doing it. But it's only here in the States, as far as I know. So I don't know, I don't know where all your channel's reach is, but for people in the US, it's with King Supers. It's with Kroger, the company Kroger. And they have different divisions. So depending on your state, it may or may not be available. They're in quite a number of states, though, and it's pretty great if you can do it, because it's like it's $75 per year to be part of the program, and then you're paying 40% of cover price to the store for being allowed to sit there, which is a big chunk. But if what you're trying to do is grow your audience, that's a way to do it. You sit in the grocery stores and you sell books, and you get to keep all but that 38% or whatever that they've promised, and then you pay $75 a year to be in the program, which you go to one Comic-Con and you're spending that on a table fee.
Yeah. I mean, here in Spain, the big one, the one in Madrid, the Madrid Comic Con, it ended up being cancelled this year, because the table fees are so high that publishers weren't going, artists weren't going. Like 2 years ago, it wasn't great. Apparently, last year it was poor, and this year it got cancelled. So I get that. That's an interesting piece of sort of information there. And so what's harder then? Putting on your writer's hat and writing, or putting on your marketing hat and selling the books?
Oh, the marketing is by far the more grinding job. I don't think you'll find a writer who prefers the marketing to the writing. If they did, they couldn't be a writer, because the writing is so hard that if you're if you have the sort of character where you want to write something, you're not also going to love marketing it, probably.
It doesn't go with socializing, does it?
Well, I don't even know that. I enjoy socializing, but marketing is a different kind of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's actually creating a business around the thing. And if you're writing, you want to be exploring these worlds. You don't want to be creating this system to optimize to get people to buy your book and starting small and figuring out how to do. I mean, it just doesn't, you just want to share your work with people. That's what an author does. And trying to figure out I have to make people be interested enough to pick it up. That's hard. And actually it is really hard, because reading a new book is an investment. It's a time
Mm.
investment. So as a reader, you don't have you have to be convinced to pick up a new piece of work a lot of times, either because it's in a genre you already like, or because a friend recommends it, or whatever. It's actually an investment to do it. So as a brand new author, trying to get people to do that is really tough.
Yeah, yeah. No, no, I get that. Because I think I mentioned last time, and for anyone that has had me tell the story again, I do apologize. Like a few years ago, because I've written a couple of books and stuff, and I got like a co-publishing deal where we kind of go halves on the printing costs, and they would guarantee that my books would be on the shelves of one of like the big bookstore chains in Spain. And
Yeah.
I was thinking about it, and I thought, who's going to pick up that book and read it? Like that book is going to be on the bookshelf of one of the big bookstores in the country.
Yeah.
And how am I going to, yeah. And that's why I decided to not go ahead. I just didn't want the ego trip of saying I got a book published, because I couldn't see it sort of going
You know,
places.
I actually have come to the conclusion that unless you have a genuine passion for doing this, that it isn't going to be something you're terribly successful at. To me, it isn't about the ego trip. I know actually it's a lot less about that to me than it is to some people. I want to write stories that are good for people to read. I want to give people things that are, enjoyable, fun,
Mm,
wholesome, happy stories that they can immerse themselves in and get some, you know, the word isn't coming to me, escapism, a little bit of
mm.
escapism. And that's actually a passion for me. I'm genuinely passionate about it. I think if I wasn't, I wouldn't be able to do this.
No, it's I think I talked to another author, Nathan Allen, a few weeks ago, a couple of months ago,
Mhm.
that I wouldn't recommend anyone to quit a day job because they want to become a writer. It's
Yeah.
something that you're going to do on the side, and it's a low risk, low reward activity.
Well,
And
and in my case, I had already quit my day job when I started, and
so,
I haven't
so,
gotten a
so
new one yet, and I'm
sorry,
still not making any money. So that's
sorry,
okay. That's okay.
but
It doesn't.
no, but it is. I don't quite have the figures, but something like how many ridiculously new tens of thousands of books get published every year in the US. And like you said, so how are you going to make it
There's
then?
there's a Pareto distribution thing, and when you start to get into Pareto distributions, that will bend your mind, man.
Yeah, yeah.
If any of your listeners have not gotten into that, that will bend your mind. It will actually probably make you mad, because once you understand it, it's like a law of the universe that only a specific percentage of people will be successful at
Mm.
certain levels. It's a little bit outlandish, but it carries across everything.
And again, to anyone listening, sorry for repeating myself again, but when I interviewed Brandon Sanderson's agent, he was telling me that sometimes, even these days, he will sell a book to a publishing house, and it might be for like 3, 4, 5 grand. So that's not enough to quit your day job either. It'd be nice
No.
to go on a holiday, but it's certainly not your ticket to, financial independence and success.
Well, okay, so let's actually go over the numbers. This will be interesting. So let's say that you want to write a book and you want to make enough money off of it to live on. And I'm just going to work in US dollars here. Just to scrape by in US dollars, you need $40,000 a year. Okay.
Yeah,
That's not a lot. It might be enough to live on if you keep it real tight.
depends on where you
Um,
live. Yeah, yeah.
Depending on where you live. So let's say you want to do that. Let's say you're publishing 2 books a year. So um, you need minimum $15,000 of income per book that you publish. And let's say you're selling your books for $15 profit. So you need 1,000 books to sell every time you drop a book reliably
Mm-hmm.
in order to make just a bare living on this. So now let's do the numbers. How many books do you need to sell a week for that to happen? You got 50 weeks in a year, roughly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yes.
so there's and actually we're going to have to double it because you're selling twice that. But either way, point is you're going to be selling, well,
20,
let's say
20 books a week, yeah.
So let's say I sit down in a grocery store and sell 40 books a week, but I'm losing 40% of the cover cost. I'm still not making it. But hopefully, over time, if you do this for a couple of years, you build up enough audience that you're selling directly to people through your email list and your website over time, and that you make enough headway that you can, eventually make a living at it. That's the hope. But that's a huge time investment. You're spending a full-time job worth of time sitting in grocery stores every
Mm-hmm.
week selling books in order to do that. And that's if you can write at the same time. That's rough, man. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that's 2 years to get to where you're just barely making a living.
And then you're gonna talk to Muppets like me for over an hour to try
Oh,
to gather
dude,
more interest. And
you are awesome, and no, do not call yourself that.
because my next question was gonna be, because I like talking to you people like you said, you want to share your world, you want to share your stories.
Yeah.
You can I'm guessing you get to do this through a long form conversation. How do you envisage doing that through TikTok or Instagram or Twitter, X, Twitter, whatever it's called these days?
I
Like,
usually the way okay, so this is another funny one, and I have not mastered this social media thing. I'm really bad at social media, but let me share my experience. I spent, after I published this book back in April, when we last talked, it was February. I published the book in April. I spent like 4 months trying to grow my audience through social media, and it was like dropping my time down a black hole. Like it was just gone, and I had nothing to show for it. So my experience is that once you have people who already like your stuff, they will follow you on social media and they will be your loyal fan base if you can find those people who really like your stuff. But trying to actually grow your network through social media is pretty tough unless you're way better at it than I am. And there are people who are relatively successful at that, and more power to them. All the props in the world. That ain't me.
the issue, I suppose, and it's just the nature of the beast, is that what you're doing is a very infrequent thing. Like you said, best case scenario, you're dropping a new book every 6 months. Best case
I
scenario.
I could do one every 3 months if I'm doing really well, but you
Right.
get the idea. It's still very
But
infrequent.
but you're
I'm
gonna
with
get
you.
but how do you keep people engaged in social media, which is like an instant thing, every day, every 2 days you need to post something. If it's gonna take you 6 months, best case scenario, to get your new book out, that's a long time to keep people engaged with you in the process, unless you start talking about all the stuff that has got nothing to do with
Well,
your actual writing.
and if you want to be a content creator, that's great. I don't want to be a content creator, really. I enjoy talking about things. I enjoy getting on and having conversations with guys like you. This is fun, man. So that's great, but this is not my full-time gig. So no, it's a case of how does any author ever make it work? It's that people love the stories enough that they're willing to put up with the breaks between stories long enough for the author to do his thing, to
Mm.
to get the book written. And they've got other interests in their life, and when the author puts out something new and cool, they get excited for a while, and the idea is you got about a 2-week window before you release a book when most of your effective publicity is for the book
Mhm.
launch. And then after that, you don't get a lot of effective book launch publicity. So the way I'm envisioning this, and I don't know if it's going to work, but we'll see, is I'm sitting in grocery stores selling books for not really enough to make a living, but enough to pay for the trip to the grocery store and to make a little bit of extra on the side. And then meanwhile, I'm also at my book launches, I'm creating enough hype and enough interest and enough publicity um, to get a significant percentage of the people who I've already made contact with, whether by social media or my email list or whatever, to be willing to come and buy the book. That's the hope.
Mm. Um, and have you got any sense of? Well, I suppose you said you're not very big on social media, neither am I. Like, what would be what's your most sort of return on time efficient sort of social media?
Um, Basically, it's taking opportunity when there is something that is photogenic that I'm doing to take a photo and just slap it up on all the social media sites and say, look, this is cool. So when I go sit down in a grocery store or whatever, I take a photo
Mm.
I have somebody take a photo of me sitting there with my stuff. And I say, I'm in Fort Collins this week. I'm in Cheyenne this week, whatever. And put that up on social media, take the couple of minutes to share it. Just today, I got a new stand-up banner. I was just talking about it. I'm actually kind of excited about this. This is cool. I put a lot of time into developing this and getting it ready. It's 7 feet tall. It's 3 feet wide. It will sit behind me in the grocery store, and it will tell people about Energemetra 6 and my free ebooks and audiobook podcast. And so I took a picture of it. I set it up in my mudroom, and I
Mm.
snapped a picture of it, and I said, look, this just came. I'm excited. This is cool. Take opportunity anytime you do something that's photogenic to slap it up on social media and say, take a look. And that's actually returned more in terms of time than anything else I've done. So,
Mm.
if you get a new book in, like, the first time a book comes in, take a picture of the unboxing. I did
Yeah.
that with my first book. That got me some actual social media attention. The second book, I forgot to do it. So it's one of those things.
Yeah.
Take
So
opportunity as you have it.
the one person, or for the people that I've talked to, sort of from the independent sphere, that I think has managed to crack the whole social media thing. If you haven't checked out my interview with him, he's a comics writer from Wales in the UK, Joseph Oliveira. He's
Okay.
on Instagram, and like you said, like the photo opportunities. But I suppose comics is different. They're a bit quicker to turn around.
Yeah.
Comic Cons, people go to find comics and buy them and stuff. But he's like posting on Instagram maybe twice a day and stuff like
Yeah.
that. But he's got it down to a T. That's
Absolutely.
someone.
And I'll learn as time goes on. I'll learn more and more, but I really don't enjoy the social media stuff much. It's like this is a duty. This is a responsibility that I have that's a part of this job, not something that I enjoy. You know what I actually enjoy? I enjoy sitting down and talking with you. I enjoy sitting down and talking with people, especially readers who've enjoyed the work.
Mm,
That's really fun. But the whole social media thing is more like, okay, I need to do this to keep in touch with people, and I do.
yeah, no, I get that. I think as well, like some publishers are kind of taken into account when they want to publish a new author. Like, was there existing? I don't know what to
Oh,
call it, not fan base, but I don't know what to call
no,
it.
no,
But
no,
like
network.
followers, like what was the existing potential customer base
Right.
before they put the book out? Not all of
That's
them,
that's all of them. Not just some of them. Every single publisher looks at that.
or maybe eight,
I mean,
not all agents are looking at that. If they like the book, they will try to sell the book. Maybe the relationship is different between the
got
publisher.
me. Agents, I have never known an agent, and I have never looked for an agent, and I probably never will at this point. So I wouldn't even know. That's a totally different world. And
Yeah.
I do have author friends who are agented, who have got agents, and when I look at the way they approach things, I actually find it to be far more bleak and depressing than what I've got in front of me. Okay, and here's why.
I suppose it's a bit more it's more about the business, isn't it?
It's not even that. It's that publishers become gatekeepers in both directions. So, for example, let's say I were to have gone to a traditional publisher to publish my first book. Do you know how expensive it would be for me to get author copies? Do you know what my profit margins would be on those? If I were to sit down in a store and try to sell those, with 40% of the cover cost going to the store, I would be losing money on every copy with most traditional publishers. It's totally out of the question. Most traditional publishers expect that if your book is going to take off, they're going to be the ones selling it. And if it doesn't, well, no skin off their nose. You're not an investment for them. That's the way they look at it. And if you're trying to do things in any kind of traditional fashion, when you get an agent and you go to a traditional publisher, you're looking for that advance. And as you get a bigger audience, you get a bigger advance. But the Pareto distribution says that there is no way that 90% of people who do that are ever going to earn out their advance, and that their third and fourth and fifth and whatever books are not going to get published right, and that eventually they're going to fall out of the business because it just doesn't work. Where if you're doing it yourself and you're doing it as kind of an indie, as kind of a self-published, as kind of a non-traditional publisher, sort of, you're in that sphere, then you can get your books for printing cost most of the time, which is what I'm doing for most of mine. And if you're selling your books at that, then 40% still leaves you with a good, 40% of the cover cost of the book coming back to you personally. So let's say you sell a book for $20 and the grocery store takes 40% of that. You're looking at, grocery store has $8, you're down to 12. It costs you another 3 or 4 to print the book, you're down to 8. So maybe you're taking home $8 a book. You sell a book every hour and a half, you're still, if you can manage that, which isn't a guarantee, then you're still doing okay for your time. It's not a great paying job or anything, but you're still at least making your time worth something. And then hopefully as you build up an audience, you get some kind of base to build off of for financial stuff. That's only if you're doing things as an indie. If you're going through a traditional publisher, that's not even a viable option. You're totally relying on those advances, and it's terrible. The business model sucks. Don't do it.
Okay, because I'm also talking to a Buying Books editor, David Butler, in a couple of weeks. So I'm sure. Well, I've already talked to him before, so
Sure.
he'll tell me a different story. But anyway, so let's go back to the writing.
Yeah.
Because I was curious about what you were saying about sharing your universe or having this crossover with other authors and
Yeah.
stuff. And you also mentioned Dragonlance, which is probably the biggest shared universe in fiction writing ever, isn't
Yeah.
it? So obviously, I'm sure it would be nice to get to those kind of levels, but
Sure.
what kind? What's your vision there? Is it like some sort of shared universe where everyone contributes in a different direction, or is just to have that quirk of, I like your character or what you've done here. Let's see how I can
I
bring it
have
into mine.
two very conflicting
Mm.
thoughts on this. Okay, so one of the conflicting thoughts is that I will never release creative control of the Energemetra 6 universe, the official canon of it, to
Hmm.
anyone. While I live, it will not leave me, because I see what mainstream sources are doing to a lot of intellectual property, and it's gross, and it's totally not something I have any interest in having my stuff ever be subjected to. So on the one hand, I will not release creative control of the canon of the Energemetra 6 universe. That said, I would love to work with other authors who want to, do a crossover with me, because that's great cross-pollination. It gives me new audience and it gives them new audience.
Mm.
And so doing a story where we have some meeting of the universes and something cool happens is always something I'm interested in. And provided we agree on the general scope of it, I'm not a very controlling person as far as being, everything down to the last detail has to be the way I want it. That's not the way I look at things. That's not
Mm.
how I approach things. I'm happy to hand something off to people and say, well, what do you think? Do what you like. And, if I have suggestions, maybe we can talk about it, but I'm not super controlling, but I will not let my main characters be taken over by corporate America and turned into woke disasters. I'm not going to do that.
That's another conversation that
It is.
I don't know if we want to go into it, because that was my idea for my next non-live stream video, and is
Mhm.
who are these adaptations of traditional fantasy works made for? Because obviously we've had recently the Wheel of Time and this whole Rings of Power thing, and I'm not entirely sure
I have
they are
I
made
have a
for.
problem with one of your assumptions.
I'm not
I
entirely
don't
sure that I've assumed anything, but go on.
You've assumed that they're being made for someone.
Well, they're made for profit, that's for sure. That's what they're made for.
No, they're not.
So what? Come on, Amazon doesn't spend $1 billion on Rings of Power to not make money.
Yeah, they do. These aren't okay. First off, you're looking at this as a company doing this. Instead, you have to consider the individuals who are involved. This is not a profit exercise for the people who are the creatives who are put in charge of those franchises at these big companies. This is a religious activity for them.
For $1 billion, for a cool billion.
Dude, how many companies have embraced a message that is obviously completely opposite to their consumers' desires, and the only thing that I can discover
Too many to name now.
right, and the only thing that I can discover that is a possible motivator for that is some kind of religious idea that has embedded itself in people who are making decisions in those companies. And the woke mind virus is a religion. It is destroying Western civilization, and it is that religion that is creating Rings of Power, that is creating modern Star Wars, that is creating almost all of the mainstream modern intellectual properties that have been taken over by corporate America. It's people who are part of the woke religion who have moved into those, and they're destroying them. And that's just obvious.
So, okay. So what's the end? Why are they doing that? What's the end goal with that?
Why did the Spanish Inquisition torture people who believed differently than they did, who were not hurting them? Why do religions that are out of control go ahead and demonize other people? Why did the new atheists demonize the Christian roots of Western civilization to the detriment of our entire world? Why did they do that? It's because people get ideologically possessed and captured, and they believe things that are not good for them or the people around them, and they let those ideas control what they do.
Even though possibly at the base origin, you think they may be motivated to do well or to do good?
Oh, of course. The road to hell is paved with good
With good
intentions. We
intentions.
all have. Have you ever heard of the book Ordinary Men by Christopher Browning?
I think I may have heard of it. I haven't read
Okay.
it.
This book was one that I encountered during college. It's a close examination, a close historical examination of the people who became the Nazi death squads in Germany during the Second World War. And they were not soldiers. They were not specially selected. They were not penalized for not taking part until you actually read into what changed them and how it happened to them. It's really hard to understand how people can be people with the best of intentions who are not coerced can be taken into some kind of ideology and turned into monsters. It's really hard to understand it, but once you do understand it, you realize that you and I and everybody else are just as susceptible to that as they were.
No, it's the same as the Milgram experiment and
Yeah, that's right.
And the Berkeley prison experiment and
Right.
all
That's
all
right.
those things. Yeah.
All of them. And once you see those things, it sort of blow, you kind of get this kind of mind blown experience at first, and then it's like, well, crap, that could be me.
Yeah.
And most people never have that. Every one of my kids is going to read that book before they finish high school. I'm not kidding. It's terrible. It's a terrible thing to do to my kids, but I love them enough that I have to do it.
I believe you. I just think that, but surely ultimately, because this adaptations, these takes, these attitudes. When I asked you who are they being made for, because obviously they're not making money, and that whole thing of go woke, go broke, it seems to be a thing. So the only thing you're scoring there is either vanity points or moral high ground points because you're not making any money. So I think
Well,
ultimately,
I think it's a religious expression.
but money talks. At the end of the day, everything we
Not
do
no,
here.
that's not true. Okay, here's the thing that Atlas Shrugged and that whole model of reality got wrong. Humans have certain needs, and I can't remember the name for it. I'm terrible with this stuff. But once those needs are fulfilled, you've got to have food, you got to have shelter, you got to have, you got these basic needs.
Yeah.
And then once those are fulfilled, people start looking for fulfillment, for personal fulfillment.
Mm-hmm.
And money does not provide that. It really, really doesn't. Once you have those basic needs met, people are looking for a way to do good in the world and to make themselves feel good, whether it's by hedonism or more often by doing something that they find valuable. And there are people who find value, like I do, in writing stories that I think are good stories and sharing them. And there are people who find value in, you name it. And that's great. Those are important things. But what we have to understand is that those things can also be hijacked. And we live in a world where there are legitimate, intelligent, spiritual beings that do not have our best interests at heart.
So what is it that they've got heart?
Well, what was the sin of Satan when he fell? It was he raised himself up above God, above the throne of God, and said, I want to be that. I want to be above those people. I want to be in command of those people. I want to be lifted up. I want to be. And we find that particular mindset in everywhere, whether it's in politics or anywhere else. And it can lead to all sorts of terrible things, whether it's on a human level or on another level.
No, and I think it works in
in any context,
any organization. I was going to say, as soon as
right.
you go some kind of hierarchy,
it does.
Those things do
and
come up,
and it winds levels. It winds up in disaster every time. That isn't how things are. That isn't a good way for things to work. And so anytime you have that happening, you wind up with these really screwed up systems that end up being religions at some level. And this is why people hate religion, is because religion is, and I hate the term religion when it's applied to me, because I don't have a religion. I have a relationship with my creator. I do not have an organized body to which I am deferent that tells me how to think and what to believe. I have a relationship with the creator of the universe. There's a huge difference. Organized religions in a human sphere always go wrong because they are trying to do something they're not supposed to do.
Well, I think we're veering off massively as usual. That's okay.
I always manage to do this, Jose. I'm so sorry.
No, I'm okay. I'm happy to talk about this. So I don't mind. I think at some sort of subconscious deep level, we humans are social animals. We need to be part of a group.
Very much.
I think group belonging is very important, and clearly the individuals that don't want to belong in groups, we got a name for them. We call them sociopaths, and it's a disease of the mind. And also more on this, because in 2 weeks' time, I'll be talking again to Dr. Goodwin, psychiatrist, about mental health in storytelling. So we'll be talking about these kind of things. So, people that don't want to belong to a group, they are mentally touched. So, and I think religion, and I think these things do serve a purpose. They, like you said, people seek fulfillment, and being part of a group gives them
they do. And I don't, I actually do go to a church with my family, and it is part of an organization. But the thing, And we do that for the social contact. There's no question about that. That's absolutely healthy. The thing is that when we get these things out of their proper place, that they start to become a monster. And the problem that we've had in Western civilization, in my opinion, is that we stopped recognizing some of those basic motivating forces of humans. We started acting like people can do without belief, or that people can do without what you would call religion. But the idea is we act like those things are extra and added on top when they're actually kind of an integral part of us, and we can't get away from them. And then when you start doing that, it's like saying we can be objective. You know how journalism is supposed to be objective? It's impossible to be objective. We all have a perspective. We all have a worldview. The best we can do is just to be honest about our worldview and try to be, to hold to the truth as best we can. That's all we can do. So when we get, and it's a very similar thing when it comes to any kind of religious thing. When you try to disconnect yourself from religion, what you end up doing is denying that it exists at all, and then making yourself totally blind to it in your own case. And so what I see in the case of the secular woke, mostly left, but not entirely left, is that they have denied that religion exists. They've put themselves in a position where they have become a religion. They have an ideology that has become their religion that they don't admit is such, and they are not able to see it in terms of truth or falsehood because they've essentially already claimed their objective.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think possibly the problem with Western society is that loss of faith and that loss of God. We've become a much more a religious society than we used to be.
Solzhenitsyn would agree.
And I think at a subconscious level that needs to be filled with something.
Okay.
Because the thing is, God or religion gives an answer to everything. You got your creator. It gives meaning to the whole thing.
Now, can we talk about stories?
When you remove that, science doesn't quite explain everything, and it's hard to accept that we are the product of chance, forever moving in an ever expanding infinite universe. We cannot understand that. Our minds, there may be 10 people in the world that can understand that. The regular person needs something a bit more tangible, I believe.
So let's do this. Here's the thing that I usually talk about with people when I get on podcasts. Here's the spiel I usually give people. Politics is downstream of culture, meaning that the culture, the way we live, sort of sets the playing field for politics. That's just kind of a fact. Culture is downstream of ideology or faith, meaning the ideas that we believe determine the way we live, which sets up the culture. Story, and I'm going to use this word in a Tolkienian way, myth lives between faith and culture. Okay, so deep stories that we attach ourselves to, that we believe in at a deep level, point back to what we believe in, and they point forward to lead the way for us. And this was illustrated by a guy when I got on Twitter to create the Energemetry 6 Twitter account. This guy posted, he said, some dudes choose one book and make it their whole personality. For me, it's Starship Troopers. and what he was saying there is, it just absolutely gets at the core of something really critical, that we as humans emotionally attach ourselves to narratives and to stories. It's just part of us. We do that.
I agree with that, yeah.
And so when we attach ourselves to a good story, it leads us in a good direction. When we attach ourselves to a bad story, it leads us in a bad direction. So myth, deep, important stories, live between what we believe and our culture, how we live, and they point back to what we believe, and they point forward to show us the way to live. That's what myth and narrative are. And so what I'm doing, my aspiration with Bright Star, with the other books that I'm writing, is to write a narrative, a myth that points back to good things to believe in, to true things to believe in, and shows people a good way to move forward in their lives.
Which is very commendable, and I understand and I get, just plain devil's advocate here.
Yeah.
The problem is defining good and bad, and that those terms can be, I don't know, relative, but certainly dependent on perspective.
Dependent, but here's the thing. There are only two possible ways to approach the problem. One is that there is no such thing as a moral authority. And that means that you and I, each what we believe is
Equally
moral
valuable.
as far as we can enforce it.
Yeah.
Then the other possibility is that there is a creator, that there is a being who sets the moral law, who determines what is moral, who is at a higher level than we are. Those are the only two possibilities.
Yeah. And then that's when you get a clash of when different people have got different
and
creators.
The reality is, and the thing that I find totally hilarious is that even people who claim to believe, 99.9% of people actually believe that there is such a thing as real morality. Somewhere inside, they believe it. Even guys like Richard Dawkins believe it. And they project that on whatever they want to project it on, but they believe that there is a moral lawgiver, that there is a real moral law somewhere, somehow. And so we all believe that there is a creator at some level. Most people who consider themselves secular just aren't honest enough to admit it.
Or is it that because we are social animals that live in big societies, we need some rules to abide by in order to make those societies work? And
that's true as far as it goes, yeah. But I don't think that speaks to the deep knowledge that we each have of a real right and wrong. And without a being to determine what that real right and wrong means, then there isn't one. And so we have something implanted in each of us that points back to a creator. Yes, you're right about the rules, but that's built on top of all of it. We try to follow that sense of moral right and wrong that was instilled in us. And that's why we make some of those rules.
It's just that I'm trying to... because I agree with you. I'm just trying to... Because obviously both you and I, and possibly most people listening to, whether we like it or not, we come from that Judeo-Christian Western background. And we can all agree that the Ten Commandments are a pretty good code of morals and ethics to live by, isn't it?
Well,
whether that's actually given to us by a creator or some pretty clever people thousands of years ago decided that, hey, these 10 basic rules are pretty good things to abide by and we should all live by them. I don't know.
You know what? I can't go with any of that, man. It's said over and over again in the Bible. And to me, this is just a basic truth that the world and everything in it, creation itself, proclaims the glory of God. It proclaims that there is a creator. Every intricate engineered bit of creation proclaims that there is a mind behind it. And if you want to get down to a deep level, the most poignant way to express that there must be design is that we have never observed information being created without intelligence. That behind everything that has design in the world, there is an intelligence, there is a designer. It has never been observed to be any other way. And as intricate and as amazing, as truly astounding as this world around us is, there has to be a being who made it. There has to be an intelligence who built it. It is engineered at a level that we can't even really comprehend, and we try to pretend that it's all accident. What kind of stupidity is that, man?
Well, I suppose I suppose it's Occam's razor, isn't it? Like the most simple explanation is the true one, and I guess actually, and maybe I am equating both, that the idea of a creator and the idea of random chance are equally simple to explain what we're doing, why we're here, what's going on.
I suppose that they have equal simplicity, but they don't have equal validity.
That would be up to the listeners or to every
Well,
person
sure,
to
and
start asking for
I
those.
don't require anybody to agree with me. I'm just telling you that when I look at the world, I can't see any way. If I'm being honest, I can't see any way that all of this has been engineered. And if you understand how everything works at any level at all, and you're honest, you go, this was engineered. I don't see how that's possible without an intelligence. It doesn't make sense. We've never observed it ever happening, ever in history, without an intelligence. So people can believe whatever foolishness they want to, Jose, but it's foolishness.
It's an interpretation. It's an interpretation. I'm
That's all
just
right. That's all
no,
right.
no. It's because I don't have as strong beliefs as you do. So
Well,
I
that's
can
okay.
appreciate where you're coming from. I suppose I lost God a long time ago, and I haven't found him again or her again, and I haven't found that whatever is going to replace that. So I just don't know is the answer. So I can
Well,
respect what you're saying. I don't necessarily disagree with you. I just I kind of okay. I tell you what.
you know what?
I wish I was religious.
There is a huge chunk of the world who are in exactly the same place you're in, Jose. And the best so let me put it to you this way. I often ask religious people who claim to be Christians, why didn't God hand us a systematic theology? Why did he hand us this set of stories in the Bible? Why if you really believe this, why did God not give us this set of rules written in a book? Because he didn't. He gave us a set of stories. And the answer that I give them, because it's a rhetorical question, is that we are not machines that are built to take rules and create a utopian world out of the rules that we're given. That's not the way humans are. We are driven by stories, by narrative, by things that appeal to our emotions and to our heart and to our senses. And those are the things that we attach to and we love. And so that's why I write, because those things are compelling. Those are the things that people fasten to. So I'm with you. I understand where you're at. And I just, I see such beautiful things and I want to share them. And so that's actually a great way to sort of pull the writing back into it, is just to say that's what I love to do, is to put these things in ways that appeal to people.
I think as well that because I don't want to stretch this any longer. I think that's a fantastic way to wrap things up because I quite like that closing remark you've made. So before we say goodbye, where can people find your work? Where can people find you? Sell yourself.
Okay. Um, I am at the letter E, the number 6 universe.com. e6universe.com is where you can find me. You can find a link to the audiobook podcast. We're live every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're reading one chapter a week of my books, starting with Bright Star, and we'll just go on through whatever we've got on hand. That's the first thing. The second thing is all of my books are free in ebook form on that website on e6universe.com. You sign up for my email list, you get the ebooks for free. I would encourage anybody who's interested to sign up, check them out. If you enjoy the stories, that's great. And then you can find my physical books on Amazon, or on, I would recommend a local bookseller, because local people need your support. So find an independent bookseller that you enjoy. If you want to get a copy of the books, grab them there. And you know, I I also want to say, Jose, thank you. Thank you for having me on. Thank you for the conversation, man. It is always fun to talk to you. And I'm sorry if I have like put a whole bunch of your audience off or something. I really don't
No,
mean
no,
to
no,
do that.
no, no. Actually, I don't care. I don't care about that. Because I was going to say, thank you very much for being here tonight. I've really enjoyed it. I needed this after the week that I had. I needed this, and I mean it. Otherwise, I wouldn't say it. We have to do this again at some point.
I want to do this again. I enjoy doing this. This is so much fun. Thank you, sir.
Fantastic. Well, anyway, everyone, thank you. There's been a few people lurking there in the chat, but they haven't made their presence felt. But there's been a few people there, and anyone watching later, I hope you enjoyed the conversation, and we'll see you soon. Take care. Bye.